What's the creepiest, most unexplainable thing that you've ever experienced? Posted one day ago. Viewer discretion is advised. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Was camping in the middle of nowhere. Around 2 a.m. I hear distant native drumming. I look around but can't see anything, but it keeps getting louder and louder and louder. Soon it sounds like there's a huge group of people banging on these drums all around me. I freaked the fuck out, ran in the dark towards my car, jumped in, turned the lights on, saw no one, so I took off, all at around 2:30 a.m. Years ago, there was a boy fishing in a forest with his parents somewhere in the States. A man approached the boy while his parents were preoccupied and asked the boy to come over to the man's house for dinner. The boy joined the man and lost track of time. It got late, and the boy stayed the night, and the next morning had breakfast at the man's house and asked the man if he could show him the way back home, because the boy's parents must have gotten worried. So the man agreed and brought the boy back to the fishing spot, said goodbye to the boy, and left. When the boy got back, his parents and a group of other people came running to him crying because apparently the boy had been missing for a few days already, while the boy thought he had only been gone for less than a day. When they asked him where he was, he wanted to turn around and point to the house where he slept and had dinner with the mysterious man, but it was gone. His parents and other people that had been searching for the boy all reported hearing native drumming the whole time, while the boy was gone, and the drumming stopped once they had found the boy. A lot of drums. A few nights ago, in a row, I woke up thinking someone was in bed with me, to the point where yesterday I woke up and started talking to them, but when I rolled over, no one was there. Really weird sensation. I have no idea how to describe that hollow feeling. Was driving home real late one night. Buddy was asleep. I swear I saw a ghostly old lady walking down the side of the road in a nightgown looking scary AF. I didn't turn around and didn't tell my buddy. I'm not sure if I saw her or it was just a trick. I think about it sometimes though. We bought a house in the Fairmount section of Philly. Our front steps faced Eastern State Penitentiary, the first U.S. penitentiary where they did crazy horrible stuff to people. Never thought much of the fact, but there were so many times unexplained shit would happen to us the house. We eventually had kids, and it scared the hell out of them too. Doors closing randomly at 3 a.m. One time our large kitchen window just fucking shattered. Ugh. And so many times I would wake because I swore I heard someone walking up our long stairway. At first it was easy to ignore because I don't believe in paranormal. However, one night a drugged up lady somehow got into our house, doors auto-locked, so we never figured out how. And when I heard the noise, I went down to see, and this lady looked like a goddamn zombie. She was screaming at me about her husband and kids. It was somewhat traumatizing. We ended up moving 2 years ago, after 8 years of that shit. I was playing with a drone with my friend at our elementary school after hours. I went to pick up the drone, and when I did, it became incredibly foggy and quiet. I went back the way I came, since that's where my friend was. I kept running in that direction, and it just kept getting foggier, and it felt like I was being watched. Eventually, my friend just appeared, and the fog went away. Me. Weird how the fog went away like that, friend. Fog? Me. Yeah, it was foggy for nearly 10 minutes I could barely see. Friend. It hasn't been 10 minutes. Me. But I was running back here for what felt like ages. Friend. No, you've been standing still for about 30 seconds. To this day, I still don't know what happened. To this day, I don't know if this actually happened or if I dreamt it. I experienced waking up in the middle of the night with my eyes closed and my shoulders lifted off the bed, as if I'm doing a half of a sit-up. My right arm was also raised upward and hanging in midair with my hand pointing toward the ceiling. With my eyes still closed, I felt a firm grip on my hand, as if someone had it in a handshake. I opened my eyes and looked into dark, empty space. I still felt a very firm grip on my palm. I felt a male presence, but I couldn't see anyone. After a few seconds, my arm and shoulders dropped, and I went back to sleep. I told this story to my mother, who I lived with 5 years later. She said she often felt the presence of an old man in the house, and once thought she saw him in the early hours of the morning. I was alone, and something was burning and tearing me from the inside in the worst night of my life. I thought it was a massive reaction to staying out in the scorching heat at the beach. Nope, it was a botfly larvae twerking next to my spinal column. When my friends removed it the next day, it was like I could breathe out from there. Ugh. When I was maybe 6 or 7, I was staying the night at my grandparents' house. I was on the couch trying to sleep when I heard whispering. They had a painting of my aunt hanging on the wall in the living room, and it was talking to me. Nothing creepy though. It was talking the way my aunt would talk to me, asking me if I was behaving in typical aunt talk. She tells me to wake my grandfather up because she needs to talk to him. I did, and when he realized she wasn't there, he began scolding me. In between threats and insults, he noticed someone moving outside the window. He grabbed his pistol and told me to stay in a room with my grandmother. A minute or two later, we hear a gunshot. Turns out, there is a prison for young adults about 20 miles from where they live. 3 of them killed a guard and escaped. They were sizing up the house to take his truck and whatever they could, but he saw them first, ended up shooting one of them in the shoulder. I have no idea why that fucking picture was talking to me. They've never experienced ghosts before or since. This was eventually explained, but definitely fits the criteria for creepiest experience. When I was about 7 or 8, I was laying in bed trying to sleep through a brutal thunderstorm. I was the only person sleeping on the second story of a 150-year-old farmhouse. The house creaked and settled and was thoroughly terrifying to me as a child, so much that I usually slept with the lights on. I just knew there were legions of ghosts and monsters ready to attack me. So, this thunderstorm wasn't doing anything for my nerves. I finally got to sleep, but was awakened by deafening thunder. I looked up to see the wall near the foot of my bed with blood streaming down it. All the nightmares were coming true. The problem was, I wasn't allowed to leave my bedroom. My parents had gotten tired of hearing that I was scared, so I laid there all night watching the blood drip down from the ceiling, paralyzed with fear. Finally, morning came, and I went barreling out of the room to get my parents. I pictured one of the moments like in It, where only I can see the blood, but no, my parents could see it too. It turns out that after 100 years or so, the dark red bricks of the chimney were dissolving, and the dust from them found a sludge in the rain. I know I'm super late to the party, but I just had to share. Even only one person gets to read this. My best friend's mother, we'll call her Sarah, was a very down-to-earth logical lady. Didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in the paranormal, anything like that. She's a smart woman, worked in the medical field, and she's the last person I'd expect to go around making up stories to scare kids. My best friend was hanging out over at our house because his mom had an appointment a couple of towns over. It was just starting to hit night when Sarah called my mother, saying she would be a bit late and that she, Sarah, had picked up a girl who was abandoned on a back road. This teenage girl supposedly lived in the next town over, and her boyfriend had kicked her out of his car after she refused to have sex with him after homecoming dance. Only problem was, it was after 9 p.m., and she was out in the middle of the back road with little traffic, no telephones, and would be 3 to 4 hours walk from her house. So Sarah, being the lovely lady that she is, picked her up. My mom says no problem, and she kept us entertained, until the point that Sarah shows up at our house crying and half panicking. She drove the girl to the address she gave, but refused to get out of the car when we got there, saying her dad would be so mad at her. Her dad doesn't like her boyfriend. Well, Sarah gets out and goes to have a word with Dad. She thought this poor girl had a terrible enough night as it was. Well, the man at the door was visibly agitated, but for entirely different reasons. His daughter had been killed 3 years before, when she had been dumped by her boyfriend on that back road and struck by a car. Sarah thought it was some kid playing a nasty prank, and went to pull the kid out of the car, only to find there was nobody there. Of course, by the time she got to our house, she was a wreck. She doesn't like to talk about the incident and is still skeptical of ghosts, but she says there's no other explanation for why she knew what a dead girl looked like, what she was wearing, where exactly on the road she was, and that her boyfriend left her there. Oh man, I can finally be in the beginning of this. I used to work as an assistant in an old mansion that was converted into an art museum in New England. The basement and old kitchen quarters were turned into the museum shop, with back wings being more smaller galleries. The servants' staircase opened into a very narrow hallway that led towards the back rooms of the basement or to the front of the shop, all beneath ground level. The stairs were kept locked from everyone except staff, and the only way to the basement was to enter from the outside courtyard through a door that was right beside the shop counter. In front of the counter was an old TV mounted in the upper corner that showed security cameras to the back galleries, but the camera switched only when motion was detected in the area. It's a late winter night. I'm staying late doing homework while the owners are in New York. The only other person in the building should be the house manager, who I know is working on the 4th floor. I'm hanging out at the shop counter in the basement when I hear some noise in the back galleries. I assume it's a patron who is making their way out, but no one comes out from the hallway, so I call down to the back that the museum is closed, and I'd be happy to show them out the back way. No answer. But now the security camera starts switching to different empty galleries, only slightly on edge. I pick up the phone to call up to my manager when, on the opposite of the shop counter, a revolving card stand full of classic postcards starts slowly turning. I think the look on my face is more surprise than anything else. It's a heavy old stand, and it takes some force to get it going. But when the turning of the stand abruptly stopped and began going the other direction, I noped right out of there. My parents have always sworn their house is haunted, but not by human ghosts, by animal ghosts. Later on, we found out the guy who used to live there actually made a habit of drowning animals in the lake out back. We had an elf on the shelf as a kid. I walked downstairs and it was in the same spot as the previous day, in a little glass candle box that had a latch on it. Being small, I assumed the poor thing was locked in there overnight, so I opened the door and went upstairs to tell my parents. They were both asleep when I got up there, and the only other person in the house was my baby brother. After I told them our elf was trapped, I walked back downstairs and it was on the chandelier. At the time, I was like, well, duh, he's alive. Now I am terrified of the thing. I sometimes wonder if I imagined it. This is actually my husband's story. When he was in high school, he and some of his friends had a camp out at his friend's aunt's and uncle's house in the country. They did the usual cooking out, putting up a tent, etc. At some point during the night, my husband went for a short walk near a small pond on the property to take a leak. As he was doing his business, he looked up and saw a man walking around the edge of the pond towards him. He clearly saw this man, who was walking with his head down. He described him as wearing a red flannel shirt, jeans, and work boots. He thought that was very strange that this guy was out walking around a pond in the country in the middle of the night. So he says, "Hey man, what are you doing?" He didn't get an answer, and the guy kept walking past him and was now facing away when suddenly he just wasn't there anymore. My husband went and told his friends what happened. The boy whose relatives owned the property was shocked and immediately ran to the house and woke them up. He had my husband describe what he had seen. The boy's aunt immediately starts to cry. She had been seeing the same guy in the house, sometimes standing at the foot of the bed, and her husband did not believe her. He had been accusing her of insanity, and apparently they were at the brink of divorce from this issue. She was so relieved that someone had been able to validate what she had been experiencing. I don't believe in the supernatural, but I sure did remember this pair of events from over 20 years ago. I was driving down the freeway in a big city after work, and my car stalled in the left lane. Some guy immediately came up and offered to tow me to the next off-ramp with a tow strap. He dropped me off, and I tried giving him some money. He declined, telling me to instead do something nice for someone else. A week later, there was a rare downpour as I got in my car, same one fixed after work. Two scruffy-looking guys came running up to me and said, "Hey brother, we missed our bus." He wanted to know if I could give the two of them a ride. This was not the best part of town, and I wouldn't have been inclined to let them in, but I remembered what the Good Samaritan had told me, pay it forward. Okay, I said, hop in. We drove onto the freeway, and I made all my usual turns heading home. It was the same way my two passengers wanted to go. After a while, we got to an exit where they asked to be let off. It was the same exact spot, in a city of millions of people, where the other guy had unhitched my car from his truck and told me to do something nice for someone else. I actually kind of forgot about this story until now. So I lived on a farm in a rural area. I was pretty young, maybe 4 or 5. My dad was out in the fields working, and a dog that wasn't ours came onto our property. My mom had me stay inside while she went out looking for it. She recognized the address on the tag as one of our neighbors, so she loaded it into our car and left, probably thinking she wouldn't be gone long and wasn't going for so I'd be fine. After what felt like forever, the doorbell rang. I had been told by my parents to let them answer the door, but since they weren't home, I figured it couldn't be too hard, so I answered it. A man who was fairly normal looking was at the door. He said that our old farmhouse used to be his when he was a kid and he wanted to look around. I told him I'd have to ask my parents. He said that was fine, he'd wait. I then told him that they were gone and I didn't know when they would be home. He said he'd be quick, but I told him no again. He said okay and turned around. I shut the door and went on with my life and forgot to tell my parents about it. A few weeks later, our elderly neighbors came and visited, and at one point they mentioned a man wanted a tour of their house, claiming it was his childhood home, but since they built the house, they turned him away and called the cops. I said, he must have had the wrong house since he came here too. After that, I had a ton of adults ask me all sorts of questions about what happened and what he looked like. No one seemed to believe me that he just left after I told him not to come in. Really creepy and kind of odd. I'm really not exactly sure exactly what he was up to, but if he wanted to do something bad, a young child home alone would be the perfect opportunity. I think he was actually trying to find empty farmhouses to rob and would knock on the door to see if anyone was home. If they were, he'd say it used to be his childhood home and maybe get a chance to case the joint. Or if no one was home, he could probably just walk right into it since no one in our community locks their doors.